Hi, Gavan, and welcome back to my channel. I'm going to talk about the Elven Realms today in J.R.R. Tolkien's stories, The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. So I spent some time doing some research, looking deeper into the Elven Realms. I became very interested in doing this as I started to think about the future and what our future technology could look like. And one of the videos that I will post in the link for you, if you do not follow my Facebook page, I shared a video called Nature is the Future of Technology. And this is something that many people who work with computers and who are engineers actually know, is that most of the parts of the computers and digital world is actually made by the elements of the earth. So computers and digital technology actually has a very strong connection to nature already. They are actually not opposite at all. I feel that digital technology actually just uses what nature already naturally gives and just advances the human species in the way that they can utilize nature and the elements that come from it. So I tried to see, is there anything in the Elven Realms that could be something that, could be something that we could see in our future, possibly. Those of us that, really love these Elven Realms and we just wish that these lands could exist. I hope I can bring some positive energy to your life today and some hope in bringing the news that yes, they can exist. Actually, Tolkien was not talking about something that was completely realistic. And when we get into the idea of magic, it's actually just science that hasn't really been discovered yet or uncovered. So we have some really exciting things, I think, in store for humanity. I definitely am optimistic about the future. And I believe that these so-called Elven realms could be something that could possibly be in mankind's future. So without further ado, let me begin. So this whole thing about technology and even architecture and the way that we build our cities being used by the elements of nature or nature itself, inspired by nature, is actually called biomimicry. And it also can have a word that's meaning the study of it, biometrics. So a lot of designers and architects that are really interested in eco-sustainability or ecology, ways to basically use nature elements to sustain our world in a more greener energy way, they actually get involved with biomimicry. So if that is something that's really interesting to you, there's a lot of really wonderful videos out there. TED Talks has a really interesting video on biometrics itself. So some of you may really enjoy learning about that. I have in the last few days. And it's something that I feel is something that I always felt was a potential for the future. And if we can just understand nature even more and really, take our time to analyze it, I think that we can really come up with some amazing technologies and inventions. So biomimicry is the study or use of nature systems to power or create living environments through architecture or through the way that things are created themselves for our world to help humans. It is about solving human problems, very complex human problems that exist, using nature as inspiration. And Julian Vincent from the University of Bath is also heading an AI research with connections to biometrics. So something very exciting about the artificial intelligence arena is the idea that AI is actually being connected with plant technology and is being programmed and using actually the natural elements of nature. And I think that this is really great. Energetically, I believe that this will bring AI, that artificial intelligence, into alignment with nature So it will be sensitive to nature. It will understand what it is made of as well, and the elements that it contains within. Something very exciting, if you have not seen some of my Pleiadian videos, I do talk about how the Pleiadian ships were said to be both inorganic as well as organic, meaning computer or digital or handmade kind of elements, and also naturally based elements found in nature and natural environments. Very exciting technology that is arising with the AI. And so you might want to keep an eye on that, on Julian Vincent, because he's one of the first ones that is actually going at this with a lot of passion. And the thing is, what these engineers of biometrics have discovered is that nature has solutions to complex problems. But the thing is, engineers say that the one thing that is really hard for us to have some of these things that nature can provide us is that there are just people like clients, governments, big corporations that don't see the value of nature. So a lot of times they think that it's just going to be like a quick fix to use plastics or something that, you know, is just kind of an instant kind of fix that man made or developed. And what biometrics is trying to teach is that actually you can get to more long-lasting, permanent fixes by using the tools of nature and the I think I just made a word up, tech nature, by combining nature and technology together. But you can use the tools of nature, and you can actually use nature in a way that's going to fix some human solutions that may be something that is really hard to do without it. And I'll get more into that in a bit. But engineers say that clients don't want it. There's time and money problems in the idea that it's about the right client wanting to buy this new technology. And it's about helping to fund their research. And those are kind of the main obstacles right now. But the science is there. So good news for humanity, it's there. It's just being waited upon to be built. And this is really where it gets really exciting when you think about, you know, your visions of future technology. So one of the things that I learned that was very interesting was Marko Bravovic is one of the biometric designers in Barcelona, or I'm sorry, he's in Brazil. And he said that there's a couple levels of biometrics or archaeologies, which is the word for these architectures that combine ecology with architecture. And he said that you can go superficially where a building or a whole city just looks beautiful like nature. It could look like a flower. If you see my thumbnail, those pictures there, it looks like, you know, leaves or petals of a flower. So we can have buildings that actually kind of look beautiful, and superficially so. And a lot of designers are using nature as inspiration in a way of form of art to make their city look beautiful and make the homes that they design more beautiful. But there's a deeper layer to it that he got to the heart of, and the Elven Realms do as well. There is another deeper level where a building is actually designed to look like a leaf, but the focus is not on necessarily how the leaf looks like, although that is also very important too. It's also about how the leaf actually cleans itself and how it works, how nature itself works to sustain itself. Because here's the thing, nobody cleans nature, nobody takes care of nature in the way that humans only have to replenish nature when they take from it. But nature is a sustaining system itself. So when we can learn to design buildings in that way, or our whole cities in that way, then we will be able to solve these complex problems that is about sustenance and keeping up. And you know it, if you have a house, your roof will fall apart or the gutters get blocked off. So using the design of nature is to eliminate those problems so that you won't see the roof falling apart or you won't have the gutter blocked off because of the actual design element behind it that focuses on kind of the science and the system of nature itself and why it has sustained itself for so long. So really exciting things many designers are taking into account and consideration. So designers interested in creating arcologies with biomimicry will work with actual biologists to learn how a leaf is designed and how not only the leaf is designed, but how does the leaf retain its own water? How does it clean itself? These are all very important things that can actually help us in building our own cities. So designers are working with biologists. This is kind of the new technology in terms of biometrics. And this way, architecture can really truly mimic nature because there's science actually involved with it in a way that solves more complex problems or even alleviates simple ones, such as, like I said, the gutter buildup or drainage features on buildings. The great thing is, one thing that he said is that there are so many solutions that nature can provide in the future because of hundreds of thousands of years of studying nature, basically, that humans have done. And Marco said something that was really wonderful. I consider him a very wise designer, and I think he'll go very far in terms of the way that he so passionately is connected to nature and understands it and understands kind of the need for humanity to start to focus on their design being inspired by nature, because this is actually going to solve a lot of problems that humans have had because they've been unaware and just kind of turning their head away from nature's natural design that's divine in its inspiration and its design itself. It's perfect. A flower perfectly finds the light in the way that it's designed. We can get really into it about the mathematics and everything, but this is where architecture needs to kind of go. Instead of just building a square building that humans have thought of with their logic and their ability to use, their reason to put bricks together. Now it's about incorporating some of these divine natural designs of nature. But Marco says this: it's inevitable that we living in big cities, our relation with nature, that almost idyllic relation, does not exist. But on the other side, everything is nature. If we start to understand that we are nature and it's not an exotic place we have to visit or leave untouched, or visit an untouched version of nature and then come back to our everyday life, that's a type of religious way of seeing nature. And once we understand it's more of an integrated system of behavior of life, actually our civilization is built on the same consciousness as the forests of nature. And our everyday life is a relation to nature, and human nature is part of it. I believe we have a multi-sensorial relationship with nature that pass through our senses, and we have a kind of more subconscious relation with nature, and they both can be triggered and they both have to talk to each other. I think the two best practices would be able to connect your wish and your sensorial relationship with nature that you see around you with your internal nature through meditation and through different practices, and I believe that's a way of being better humans. So I was very inspired by this because one thing that we understand about Tolkien's elves and about the Elven spiritual path and my whole channel and everything, and people who feel inspired by the elves, it's because they represent a better version of humans. I mean, that's what they basically represent in the stories. However, the reason why is not because they're chosen or they're more divinely created. Everything is all one, but it's because they represent humans that have not lost their connection to nature. And so when humans have lost their connection to nature, they have almost downgraded themselves in a way. And so it's about awakening to the nature within ourselves and within everything around us. And how can we bring the inner nature outward and express it beautifully in our world together? How can we create more digital technology that emphasizes the nature within ourselves? How can we bring forward the natural design elements of nature itself through the sensorial experience of looking at nature and understanding how nature works? And how can we build our cities around this? And I think that that is something that Tolkien was trying to get at, in the idea that the elves never lost their connection. They were bound to Arda, and they didn't have a choice of moving away from nature and the idea of closing their mind off to it, stomping all over plants and throwing their garbage down on the ground. They didn't have that ability. And unfortunately, in today's world with humans, humans have that choice. They have that choice to throw their trash anywhere. They have that choice to do that. And so elves did not have that choice. There was, unfortunately, I guess you could say there was no free will in that idea, because they were already bound to nature itself. And so that is maybe the difference between humans and elves. And so let's get into the Elven Realms. And I went through the books and I actually just pulled out basically the appearances of the Elven Realms, and we can discuss how we can basically create that in our own world, and why it's not something that's in Fantasyland. It's not in Fairyland in terms of something that is not possible. It's something that actually is truly possible, and we are moving towards technology that will be able to bring this into manifestation. If humans have their priorities in that direction, and if they want that bad enough, and if they put their minds together and they want to create these types of cities together, and even just, towns or even just homes, this is something that everyone can have. And it has a lot to do with greener energy. It does. Although green energy itself, such as wind power, water power, solar power, is not going to be giving us the energy for everything that we have in our life today. We're going to have to use nuclear energy and things like that. That will still have to exist. But as we start to rely more on the natural types of energy, I believe that we will align better to nature in the way that the elves did, because one of the things that you learn when you go through the Elven Realms is they're off the grid. They're not attached to any kind of electrical companies or grids. They don't pay an electrical bill. They simply use what is around them to their best of ability. And the technology that they use may be a little advanced. And when Tolkien was writing about his Elven Realms, I think that he was kind of thinking about how nature could be more of an advanced technology that could be used in these advanced civilizations. So let's begin. So what I found is right here, let's start with Lothlorien. Lothlorien is the one place that I found many examples of advanced technology. One thing that you learn about the Lothlorien elves is that they're not traders or barterers like the Mirkwood elves, so they do not leave their realms, except for a small amount of them that are known as the messengers that run around the other areas of Arda and Middle Earth, and they are the ones that gather information. But nobody leaves Lothlorien if they live there. So everything has to come from the force itself, from the water around them, and this is how they basically power their city, which is actually really quite big. So Caras Galadon, which is the city of Lothlorien, it had countless lights amid the many tiered branches of Malorn trees that were gleaming green, gold, and silver light. One of the things that we learn is that when the Fellowship meets the Lothlorien guards in the forest as they're walking towards Lothlorien, they learn that the guards are carrying these lanterns with slender silver beams that can be turned on and off quickly. So they're not fire, which is something that you would have to light. It's simply something that actually has a switch to it, so they can go on and off. And we'll get more into what that could be there. And there also is solar powered is mentioned, or something that absorbs energy and emits a glow. So here is the part where solar powered is mentioned by Tolkien. There was a wide treeless space before them, running in great circle and bending away on either hand. Beyond it was a deep fosse, a ditch, lost in soft shadow, but this grass upon its brink was green, as if it glowed still in the memory of the sun that had gone. So if grass can be charged by the sunlight, which is what Tolkien was talking about, and so that it glows and emits a glow, then so can other things as well in the realm. So I have some jewelry that like this, that when you put it into a light or underneath this, even in the daylight and the sunlight, it will glow like a soft green or a soft blue color. So this is something that we see being used in Lothlorien, is kind of this phosphorescent type of light. And there is actually a type of there's a type of glowing substance that Tolkien refers to in another book of his when he's talking about actually Ulmo, and this is in the Silmarillion. This is sea fire. So this is not Tolkien's book, by the way. This is actually all of the plants, and it's basically all of the plants and trees and flowers of Middle Earth. So I will go through this book and some other videos and talk about some of the herbs and the special plants that were used by the elves, and the different uses that they have and how they relate to real life, because I believe that Tolkien understood a lot about herbology, and he definitely knew that nature could be used in healing and bettering our own bodies. So I'll definitely go through that in another video. But there was something called sea fire, and this is where you hear about it. So then Tura bowed in reverence, for it seemed to him that he beheld a mighty king. A tall crown he wore like silver, from which his long hair fell down as foam glimmering in the dusk. And as he cast back the gray mantle that hung about him like a mist, behold, he was clad in a gleaming coat, close-fitted as the mail of a mighty fish, and in a kirtle of deep green that flashed and flickered with sea fire, as he strode slowly towards the land. In this manner the dweller of the deep, whom the Noldar named Ulmo, Lord of Waters, showed himself, Datur, son of Hur, of the house of Hador, beneath Vinamor. So this is basically just a very dramatic scene in the Silmarillion, and this is when you get a glimpse of this usage of this bioluminescent type of element, and he called it sea fire. And actually, I have some research on it. It's very interesting, and I will read it right here. So this is actually an article where it's about the different ideas for bioluminescence technology, because this is something that's going to be used in the future more. And this is what Tolkien was talking about in terms of how these elven realms were lit, as well as using fire, of course, but there was other types of lights that were going on as well. So many of us know of bioluminescence from the yellow-green glow of fireflies, abdomens, and backyard woods. Some other organisms on land, including mushrooms and glowworms, can light up the night too. And in the oceans, bioluminescence flourishes. Shrimp, squid, sharks, bacteria, and the vast majority of fish in the deep seas inky black exhibit this talent. Today, scientists and engineers are trying to harness the radiance of living things. Fortunately, the chemistries that produce bioluminescence tend to be relatively simple. A light-emitting protein, dubbed luciferin, typically reacts with oxygen in the presence of an enzyme called luciferase, along with other agents. And I think they named it Lucifer because Lucifer means light, and so they call it luciferin. In contrast to fire, an electrically generated light, bioluminescence is cold light. The reactions that create this light waste very little energy as heat. This aspect makes the phenomenon useful in sensitive environments, such as the tissues of living beings, and it's one reason researchers are now tapping the light of life for medical studies, military weapon systems, and more. So here's some of the things that they're using. So street lights into tree lights. One long envisioned application for bioluminescence is to replace electricity draining conventional street lights, lit up road signs, and interior lighting. One route, splicing genes from bioluminescent fireflies and marine bacteria into trees. Tree leaves would soak up sunlight during the day to provide energy through the night. Theo Sanderson, a PhD student at the Wellcome Trust's Sanger Institute, who's working on this idea, says, glowing leaves could be turned on and off by tinkering with genes that control the plant's circadian rhythm. The trees would come on at night and go off during the day. The trees would need only air, water, and soil nutrients to maintain their urban lighting duties. It is definitely theoretically possible, Sanderson says. How cool is that? As an undergraduate at the University of Cambridge, Sanderson worked with a team that investigated the concept. An image from a 3D model visualization, a bioluminescence lit city appears to the left. And about a year ago, the team developed a genetic unit that can be inserted into other life forms to spark luminescence. In separate work, the first engineering of truly autoluminescent plants in the lab was announced in November 2010. Researchers transplanted genes from bacteria into the chloroplast of a tobacco plant, getting it to faintly glow on its own without having to pump in fresh luciferin to keep the reaction going. About a year ago, the team developed a genetic unit that can be inserted into other life forms. And I said that. The major challenge for actually using plants as lighting sources, though, will be racketeering up the brightness. The Cambridge group experienced this issue when they created a bubble lamp of modified glowing E. coli. We were able to read by the light of our own bacteria, but only just. Sanderson said, that was exciting for us, but it is not going to replace road signs anytime soon. Okay, so we still have some time to go, but this is basically Tolkien's vision of a whole city in Lothlorien that was powered by these different types of lights, that was not electrical, it wasn't plugged into a grid in any kind of way. So in the city, they have many silver lights that are silver lamps that are hung. So you can picture all these different lamps that can be hung, and they can go on and off with a switch. So kind of like what they said is that, you know, these lights can be turned on and off easily. Gates opened also without guards in sight and shut behind them. So there was automatic doors that was in Lothlorien. So we now have automatic doors pretty much everywhere. But the thing is, this was not necessarily attached to maybe a computer program, a software program that controlled it. But what I believe is, and I've seen some technology now, is that they were using plant sensors. So plant sensor technology is something that is being utilized as well, because they're realizing that plants are very sensitive organisms, and they can detect when basically an object is in front of them. So here is something on plant sensors, and this is kind of interesting. So this one is about the doors first. So the automatic doors, I wanted to kind of give you a little bit of history here, because it's interesting that Tolkien would write about the automatic doors, and I was wondering if they were seeing that around his time. So it says this: automatic doors are used throughout the world, and they were actually surprisingly created in ancient Greece. Greek mathematician Heron of Alexandria invented an automatic door system using a series of ropes and pulleys. Water was heated by a large fire and pumped into containers, which activated the opening system. So we have also a little bit of hydro energy here being used. And then after the initial Greek door, it wasn't until the 20th century that automatic doors were developed as a popular product. In 1931, two American engineers, Horace Raymond and Sheldon Roby, designed the first optical device to open an automatic door. The invention was installed in Wilcox Pierce restaurant to help waiters carrying plates and glasses. And in 1954, which is when the Lord of the Rings, actually the Fellowship, when that book was published, in 1954, during a period of post-war optimism, another pair of Americans, D. Horton and Lou Hewitt, invented the first automatic doors operated by mat auctionaries. And mat auctionators use a hidden electronic system inside the door mat. And when someone stands on the mat, the door automatically opens. So there's sensors that can tell when someone's on the mat. But now plant sensors are actually being used as well in technology. And here is one right here. So this is about how, where did that go? I had this. So the plant's sensory systems, they are very advanced in the idea that they can actually detect if there's a temperature change in front of them. They can detect many different things. So it's actually really exciting to learn about the plant technology that's being used. Plant perception, or plant gynosophilology, is the ability of plants to sense and respond to the environment by adjusting their morphology, physiology, and phenotype accordingly. And botanical research has revealed that plants are capable of reacting to a broad variety of outside stimuli, including chemicals, gravity, light, moisture, infections, temperature, oxygen and carbon dioxide concentrations, and even parasite infestation or disease and physical disruption, sound, and touch. The scientific study of plant perception is informed by numerous disciplines such as plant physiology, ecology, and molecular biology. So I believe this is a plant-based technology that Lothlorien doors used in order to open and close without any guards, because that's what the Fellowship remarked, is that there were no guards, there was no pulleys or anything. The Lothlorien doors just simply opened up for them and then closed behind them. So there had to be some kind of advanced sensoring system. And when we get deeper into plant sensory systems, then I think we will be able to utilize that technology more that Lothlorien was talking about and using without any kind of computer system involved, but what computers basically are using as well as electrical networks and sensoring systems as well, especially like touch screens that we're using now. So yeah, very exciting to see, this being used in Lothlorien. And also, a fountain was powered to fall into a basin of silver from which a white stream spilled out, and then it ran into the great river of Anduin. So there is also a fountain that was being powered as well by the river that was close by the Lothlorien woods. And so there's a use of hydro technology here, or hydropower, that would actually make the fountain be able to spray out. Because it wasn't, I was trying to see if it was like a natural geyser type of fountain, but it wasn't. It was actually a fountain that was being pumped continuously, and spilling over into a silver basin that was basically at the center of the Lothlorien city. One of the things I wanted to add was that our architecture these days are trying to take into consideration about the environment around the houses being built, which is really great to see. I really love seeing these modern houses that have like trees like right in the center, or that they're kind of building around the plants in the gardens that are already in that area. And Galadriel and Celeborn's house had a Malorn tree grow right through the middle. And then they had this fleet, which was basically like this landing. It was kind of like a ship's deck. That's how Tolkien described it. So you would have these decks, and then you would have the tree growing through in the middle, and to support them basically. And this is where Galadriel lived with her husband Celeborn, and this is really something that we're seeing now in the futuristic architecture out there, where we have trees in the middle. And what they do is they enclose them with plastic or a type of even glass. I think glass is usually what they use, but they enclose it with glass so that it can kind of protect the tree as well as keep out the bugs out of the house and everything. But at least you have this tube that doesn't disturb the tree and its growth. So that's really exciting. That's what Lothlorien used. So the city generally is powered, it seems to be powered by water of the Great Anduin, and also by the solar power or the moonlight, which could be what the slender silver beams in the lanterns maybe have. I mean, that could be what the silver light is, because the different lights were gold, silver light, and green, and different types of light from solar or being infused with the luciferin is going to emit a different color and a different type of intensity to the light. So there's different types of solar, moonlight, and also maybe the bioluminescent energy that's being utilized in Lothlorien to create the beautiful lights that you see. So I believe that this is definitely a way that we could possibly live. This definitely is using a lot of green energy, and using what nature is already giving out freely as renewable energy. That does not cost anything, except maybe in the construction to actually build, the turbines and the the mechanisms behind it in order to charge cities, but at the same time, the actual energy itself is free. So this is a really wonderful thing because we can really save a lot of money in terms of energy in that way. Now, the thing is, with Rivendell, I looked into it. Rivendell is a little less described. And one of the things that I read in Alan Lee's Lord of the Rings sketchbook, because I was looking to see how Alan Lee, as a designer, well, as an artist, because he was the one who was responsible for making the sketches for the Lord of the Rings movies, and so he wrote this about Lothlorien, and then I'll get into Rivendell. I don't think I've ever seen any pictures that come close to matching the evocative strength of Tolkien's writings about Lothlorien, including my own. It is not a matter of simply translating his descriptions into pictorial form, because their strength is not so much in the pictures they conjure up as in the feelings they evoke. I think these feelings are derived from something primordial, a connection with the forest that was broken early in mankind's development, a lost paradise that part of us still yearns for. This comes through in all of Tolkien's writings about nature, but it seems to take on extra power in those episodes concerning trees and forests. Lothlorien in particular becomes not just the heart of the remaining elven kingdoms, but almost the soul of Middle-earth itself. So I really enjoyed that. And it's true. I mean, Tolkien was talking about, like I said, the elven people that never lost connection with the earth and really used it to its fullest potential, where, you know, they used all this energy for free and they had these amazing cities. So Rivendell is something that's a little bit different. It resides actually in a valley, but on a mountain, and it's surrounded by waterfalls that drop into the sea. And the virtue of Rivendell was that all fear and anxiety was lifted from the minds of the fellowship. The future, good or ill, was not forgotten, but ceased to have any power over the present. Health and hope grew strong in them, and they were content with each good day as it came, taking pleasure in every meal and in every word and song. Rivendell was known as a place of healing, a place of cheer and merriment. It was definitely a place where, you know, Elrond would hold many parties and feasts, and they would celebrate there. And they would also welcome weary travelers that didn't mean anybody harm, especially those part of the fellowship and everybody that they could tell that were, you know, friends of the elves. And one of the things that's interesting about Rivendell, and we're seeing this in the future of technology in terms of architecture, is Sam remarks, it's a big house. And it's very peculiar. Always a bit more to discover and no knowing what you'll find around the corner. So one of the things that I have really thought was very neat to see is the idea that houses are kind of expanding now. If you watch any kind of architecture shows, some of them are on Netflix. I highly recommend them. Some of them can look a certain size, and then you can actually open up other wings to the houses. And so it made me think of Rivendell, that Rivendell had this ability to kind of either expand itself and kind of keep on going in more of like an elvish magical way. But in terms of how we can see our houses in this way, we can start to use space better. And Rivendell, as basically Alan Lee sketched, he followed the book pretty closely. He called it a Scandinavian Shangri-La. So the idea of like just this beautiful haven and Scandinavian type of style where it's very minimal and it only has what's required of it. So the usage of space is actually something that's really importantly used, I think, in the architecture of Rivendell, as well as, what we are seeing now in terms of the future of design and houses. So Sam remarked that it seemed like the house just kind of went on, and you never knew what you were going to find, and it seemed like the house was changing. And I didn't write it down, but in the Lord of the Rings, in the Fellowship book, he talked about how it seemed like there were a lot more people in the house than it looked like it could contain. So there were these rooms that could expand or could, basically keep on taking more and more in. And that was maybe the magic of Rivendell there. But what we find out is the pine forest covers high in the elevations north of Elrond's house. So there's a pine forest that's right above the house of Elrond, and the actual house is kind of tucked secretly in a valley in the mountains, surrounded by the waterfalls. And so this use of hydropower may be in effect. I didn't quite see anything that would say that it was, but I did notice that there was some kind of natural elements that could have been naturally carved out of water, such as some of the stone benches in Rivendell were just kind of naturally carved into a seat. And then that's where Bilbo was sitting down. And so there's this element that water is being used in Rivendell, but I mean hydro technology, but it's just that you don't really see it as directly. But one of the things that you do learn is that Rivendell really utilizes fire and fireplaces. And in every window of Rivendell, there's always a soft light that glows by candlelight. So it's a little bit of a different type of, I think, way of using energy. They use more firelight in Rivendell, and it creates this hygge feeling, which is kind of the Danish way of creating like a very cozy atmosphere. It's become very popular in these times of creating your house in that way, especially during kind of the cold months. If you live in an area that has a lot of cold months, a lot of hygge is very described as using lots of fire and comfy, cushions and velvety blankets, and creating this really nice atmosphere of candlelight and this really soft glow. And that's kind of what Rivendell was known to have. So as far as the technology in Rivendell, it seemed like they were just using basically natural energy, like the candle lights, and because they were not plugged into electricity, they were simply using what they had, candlelight and lanterns everywhere. And when we get to Mirkwood, we start to see that they also have to rely on nature to give power to their city or to their kingdom. So Mirkwood's features is that it's a cave dwelling, and there's huge doors of stone with a river that ran out of the height of the forest and flowed on and out into the marshes at the feet of the high wooden lands. This great cave forms countless smaller ones that opened out on every side and wound far underground and had many passages and wide halls. But it was lighter and more wholesome and more sweet-smelling than goblin dwellings, and neither so deep and not so dangerous. So it wasn't a very deep cave dwelling, and it was there was more abundance of light. So they probably had like a sky roof or maybe openings in the cave where they could have the natural sunlight come in. But one thing that you do learn is that the elves in Mirkwood did carry lanterns and torches. So they were a little bit more old-fashioned in that way, where they would actually, like a castle in England or something, you would see torches on the wall and they would be lit with fire. So these definitely relied on fire a lot. And they also loved the beech trees, and the way that they built their houses around the cave, because the cave really was the kingdom of Thranduil, and it was the palace and the stronghold that held the treasures, and as well as it protected the elves of Mirkwood. So if the elves of Mirkwood were feeling ever invaded by enemies, they would run into the cave of Thranduil. And the subjects of the king mostly lived and hunted in the open woods around the cave. And they had houses or huts on the ground and in the branches of trees. And like I said, the beech trees were their favorite trees to use. They had red torch lights on the walls, and they also held them in hands that were lit by fire. There was carved stone pillars, so they had some type of technology that they could carve stone. They also carved wood furniture, so a lot of the furniture and kind of the dwellings of the elves was all made of wood, and also some stone as well. And there was a portcullis which could be dropped down and prevented people from getting into Mirkwood's caves. And you've seen that in basically in front of castles, where it's like this like metal door that comes down. And so that was what was blocking off people from trying to get into Thranduil's caves by the riverside. So there was actually a portcullis that was actually being used through pulleys and levers, really. So it wasn't automatic. And they also used oaken trapdoors, which opened upwards into the king's cellars of wine. And the wine and other goods came up the rivers or over land to the long lake. Now, this is very interesting. This is how they ended up trading and bartering without even going into town, into Lake Town. So often they just basically, the wine, they would order wine and other goods, and it would come up the river, and it would be picked up by the elves, and then they were just tied together like basically big rafts, like these barrels of wine, or they were rowed up the stream by those in Lake Town. And then sometimes they were loaded onto flatboards. And when barrels were empty, the elves would just cast them through the trapdoors and opened the water gate or the portcullis, and the barrels then floated out. And that's how we found out, that the Hobbit and the dwarves escaped from the prison of Thranduil in The Hobbit. And so they just floated down the current of the Forest River, and that's how they ended up trading back and forth. So they didn't use any other vehicle except for the use of water. And I just think that this is something that definitely will save energy and money and time. We see this with the barges on the rivers, and we do see that. But this is something that I think was really interesting as far as the technology being used was just simply using the natural river that surrounded the caves as their way of receiving goods back and forth from Lake Town instead of actually going to get it. And it said here that this is what I wanted to read. So this part here was, I think, kind of an interesting thing in the idea that there are lots of different types of earth elements that we use in technology today. And there's things like the lanthanum, which is used in night vision goggles. There's neodymium, which is a laser range finder or guidance systems and communications. And europhium, which is fluorescent and phosphorus in lamps and monitors. So there's lots of things there's these rare earth metals that actually could be used in ways to actually build advanced technology, and something that maybe the elves did use as well, knowing their knowledge about the elements and the earth. So humans, I think, are just getting better at doing that. And thank goodness for the study of biometrics. And I think this is really exciting. I would definitely say, keep an eye on this biomimicry that is definitely coming up. And if you are somebody like me that wants to see our world enter into this place where we have advanced technology and we also start to utilize nature in a better way, be more aware of it within ourselves as well as outside, then I think that this is definitely the future of technology, is to use what nature already has naturally and been using to sustain itself. And how can we make more advanced cities? How can we actually make more advanced homes by using the nature technology? And this is something that definitely you could see in the Elven Realms, because they did not use anything else except for nature around them. So I thought that was really great to see. Tolkien, although he started writing his books like in the 30s, and this was published in 1954, The Fellowship of the Ring. And technology was kind of starting out, like he could see where it was going. So he himself was not against technology in any kind of way, but what he was against was just kind of the greed that could be behind the machines, as he calls it, and the usage of technology that would make us forget nature. That's basically what he was most concerned about. So those of us that keep nature in mind as we use our advanced technology, I think that we're doing Tolkien a great service. And, you know, this is something that he wanted to see the world as, is one that would not forget the natural laws of nature within ourselves as well as around us. And that's something that I think, you know, I want to try to be an advocate more for in the future. And I really do want to help support these biometric designers and engineers. And I just applaud them for trying to build homes and trying to build, you know, buildings and trying to design things that are going to be something that's actually going to be better for humanity. And they're inspired by nature so much. One thing that I found out, I have no idea how it's done. I would have to do some research on learning. But Marcos Bravovic, who was the biometric designer, in a video called Nature is the Future Technology, he showed actual slides on this video of things that they're designing, and they actually grew a lamp. They grew a lamp, and it's a beautiful design. It kind of looks like a palm leaf coming out. And what he said was that it was combining the plant biology with computer digital kind of printing and communication. So what's happening is they actually have a laboratory of these lamps being grown. And I don't know how it's being done, but it's just amazing to think about. I mean, this is the type of technology that we're talking about, is when we could really start to see the interconnection between the organic and the inorganic, and things can be grown instead of actually being put together, and, you know, just having this kind of man-made superficial type of way of doing things that actually wastes a lot of energy, it wastes a lot of money, and things can just be grown, things like lamps, in a lab that's actually very connected to the way that plants would be able to basically use the bioluminescent protein. And so these lamps are able to emit their own light based on plant biology, and they're grown through computer generation. And basically, I'm not sure how exactly it's done, but I'm sure there's like a whole other world out there on biometrics that you can just open the door to. And I hope that I might have opened the door a little bit for you. As you all know, I'm a starry elf, so I have my eye as well as on the future as well as part of the past being connected to our original state of nature. But I'm definitely excited when I hear technology like this. And so I just wanted to bring you all that good news, and we can discuss a little bit. I'll take some comments here, and let's see if you guys have any. Oh, I like that, Jonathan Melton. So arcology reminds me of the arcology. So if we build a nature tech society, are we building an ark? Yeah. I mean, definitely, there's this idea, and I definitely think that the ark, in terms of what we know in like the religious books, is basically it's like a poetic metaphor for like a library that's generated by computers, and the idea of collecting information and storing information, not just digital information, but also the biology information, such as the DNA and the blueprints of life. So yeah, I definitely can see it that way. So Nicole Ninja, that's true. We don't understand the natural energy and the way it works. The ability for plants to have memory and communicate with one another, for example. Absolutely, yes. That's the interesting thing. So when you actually, because my mind has fused technology with nature, and it has for a long time, the way that I see the internet itself is like roots from a giant tree extending out across the globe in the same way that a forest would extend its roots. There are electrical impulses and electrical waves of energy that actually go through plants. That's how they sense things. Like the sensitive plant, if you touch it, it's because of electrical impulses that causes it to close up. So, I mean, basically the computer is like, or the internet is like a big forest, a big giant forest over the world that is extending its roots out. Now, what we put into it is determined about, how we treat basically this giant tree that's extending out across the world. But absolutely, plants and computers or anything in that regard, as far as the advanced technology, is all connected. It's all natural energy that's just being what can you say, elevated maybe, or just used to a higher degree and potential, so that it works maybe faster than organic nature. Or yeah, it's really, really interesting when you start to, like I said, look into that study of biometrics. Can I ask where? I'm sorry, your name is in Greek, isn't it? Or is it Russian? I cannot pronounce your name, but you're saying, can I ask where your information about Elven civilization comes from? And have you had a past life regression, or what do you think this is not your imagination? Okay, so that's like 3 questions. So all this information about the Elven civilizations just came from Tolkien's writings. That's it. That's really all that I was more concerned about, was just to show Tolkien's actual visions of the Elven realms and how they actually could be something that truly could manifest in reality, that with the right technology, with the priorities of human civilization, we could actually build worlds that look like that, or we could build cities that look like that. So that is what I'm talking about. As far as my other videos go, sometimes it's just intuitive, looking into past lives as well as future visions. I'm just a very intuitive person, so everything on my video is or on my channel is about just going deep within, and it comes from an intuitive observation on life, basically. So Scotty boy, exactly. Imagination is how we create reality. As it has to be imagined first before it is created. Absolutely. I definitely think so. And Scotty, I don't know if you've seen some of my other videos, but Tolkien a lot of times talks about the imagination as far as writers and artists and inventors. They're not just Imagineers. They're actually sub-creators, in the idea that they're actually able to create a vision for others to see and to experience. So Tolkien actually saw it even deeper in the idea that it's really about having that thought, and then you're actually experiencing yourself as a creator of that, and you're a sub-creator, because he believed that we were working towards an overall goal that can be universally understood, and that there's this single creation that we're trying to create, life expanding and growing, and our species learning together and moving towards something. But then there's also these individual sub creations that we each create too. So yeah, it's true. I mean, you do have to have the imagination, and then it comes forward if you believe in it. And then glowing substance. So Palladian 777 Viking says glowing substance sounds like stardust. Yeah, I mean, I would think like maybe there would be an element of stardust that could be bioluminescent as well, if we could somehow tap into that potential energy of the star. But that sounds like that's a lot of energy to contain. Nicole, natural bioluminescence does exist in nature. Yes, it does. It's a protein that's in certain creatures, and also certain plants as well. And so think about how fun this might be if we really want to get into the idea of creating human hybrids. Now, I am somebody, I kind of like the idea of leaving humans naturally to evolve, but I also think that it would be interesting to see if humans could actually be created with the protein that makes them glow, and then they would be like glowing beans. Basically, they would glow like fireflies or mushrooms in certain lights and things like that. But yes, I thought that this was very interesting in the idea of bringing forwards the technology of the Elven Realms, something that I've always been kind of looking at into. I like to know that things can be possible, and I like to talk about reality. Sometimes people may think like I actually am all about the imagination, which I am, but I also really like to think of things that can actually be possible. Maybe it's just my own way of wanting to have what I want, and basically just I guess I want to make sure that our visions of what we love so much can actually be true realities. That's really important to me, and I feel that when you look deeper into the technology, if you really pay attention to what designers and engineers and inventors are doing and scientists are doing, you actually see that they're working behind the scenes to create these types of worlds that we really want to see. So kudos to all of those that are in these fields. And I'm just someone that talks about them, and I kind of reiterate what's going on in terms of, kind of the visions that they have. But these are the people that are working behind the scenes, and they're working to create a better world for all of us. So definitely support your scientists and the biomimicry designers and the engineers that are involved with this, because they are the ones that are doing this. And so we can feel a lot of gratitude, and I'm very grateful for them. Absolutely, because that's not my field. That's not what I've done. And we all have our own roles to play, as Elrond said, in the Fellowship of the Ring. So they have a very important role. So keep your eye on the new technology that's coming out. And if you follow my pages of High Elven Wisdom and Love or the Palladian University of Wisdom, you're going to see that I will share things that I find that's kind of moving us into that future, and neat technology that I find that people are discovering, and that are really bringing, our visions to fruition of what we want to see in the world. These beautiful elven realms like we have behind me, because I do believe that it is a possibility. And to be honest, if I didn't believe that the elven realms and that humans could consciously evolve themselves into beings like the elves, or even, have a world in the way that Tolkien saw, I wouldn't even make this channel if I didn't believe it was possible. So to me, it is all possible. And you just, like I said, you just have to believe it. And together we can create what we desire and what we want to experience in this world together. I do believe that. So Hen and Lei for watching, and I will see you all in the next video.